This week's winner, AI chip makers and anyone swinging for the fences. This week's loser, anything defensive, slow growth, or priced for prudence.
And with SpaceX potentially filing next week and Anthropic now at a $900 billion valuation, the mega IPO era is no longer hypothetical. Let's get into it in this week's winners and losers.
Quick note before we dive in, this podcast is for informational purposes only, and nothing we discuss should be taken as investment advice or a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any security. Past performance does not guarantee future results, and one cannot invest directly in an index. For the full disclosure, check the end of this recording. So let's walk through the week because it's hard to overstate how much shifted in just 5 trading days. 2026 IPO proceeds went from 18 billion to 28 billion in 1 week. That's a 55% jump, and most of it came from Cerebras' $5.6 billion deal.
Right, and Cerebras wasn't the only AI play on the field either. $3 billion deals this week with an AI angle. This feels like a turning point. AI has long dominated the venture capital landscape, but this week AI became the dominant force in the IPO market.
But there's more going on here than that. And I think the newsletter's 3 takeaways really set the right tone. Yes, Cerebras crushed it. And we're also looking at an imminent filing from SpaceX, but the Iran war is still hanging over everything.
Right, that macro head overhang really hasn't gone away. Investors want quick upside or they're not going to participate. That's a very specific risk posture. And there's a sense that a bad headline on Iran or trade or inflation could still upend the apple cart here.
That's just a quick detour, though, because we do have to start with Cerebras. This deal reset the bar. $5.6 billion raised, $55 billion market cap. That means it's the largest AI IPO ever, the largest US tech IPO since Uber in 2019. That's a lot of stats, but it is a big deal.
Yeah, and the pricing dynamics were wild. It priced $60 above the range at 185. Closed the first day at 311. That's a 68% pop. Biggest first day pop for a $5 billion IPO since 2000. And then it gave 10% back on day two.
Yeah, that day two pullback is the part to pay attention to, in my opinion. The pop was real, but so was that immediate skepticism.
I think the valuation is the issue. It was trading at more than 100 times forward sales. So price to perfection is probably the right phrase here.
hmm The bull case dethroning NVIDIA and some of the workloads is generally compelling, though. That's a $5 trillion competitor. But the reality is, getting to that scale is going to be enormously difficult. And let's not forget the long string of near-term lockup releases on the horizon.
Right. The bull case isn't crazy. Cerebras has the technology. It's got real customers, and OpenAI's $20 billion order from last week is a meaningful anchor. But at these levels, you're really paying for execution that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, again, pointing to that old chestnut price to perfection. Any stumble, supply chain, customer concentration, lockup dynamics, and the multiple could compress fast. And this ties into a bigger theme because Cerebras wasn't the only big swing this week. We had geothermal energy developer Fervo up more than 50% by the end of the week. No revenue, came to market at a nearly $9 billion market cap, but investors said yes.
Right, and the Winners and Losers newsletter calls this out directly. The IPO market has always had lottery tickets, but rarely have so many received such large valuations. In addition to Cerebras and Fervo, there was X Energy the week before, Beta Technologies last year, and now we've got quantum computer developer Quantinuum in the pipeline.
That's a pattern, not a coincidence. The market has decided that swinging big is the right play right now. Growth is definitely back in style.
And I think the flip side proves the point. So GMR Solutions, KKR-backed emergency medical services provider, that company slashed the price by over 30% this week, and it still dropped 10% on its debut. I think investors saw that slow growth, that huge leverage, and they shrugged their shoulders.
That's not to say that a company must bring a moonshot or stay home. We're still getting filings in oil and gas, defense, and profitable businesses with AI tailwinds. Slow and steady has been a staple in the past few years as markets recovered, but some of the largest IPOs now are the moonshots.
Which is a weird market dynamic. Usually you'd expect defensive plays to outperform during this period of macro uncertainty. Instead, we're seeing the opposite.
Because the macro uncertainty is itself driving the FOMO. Investors think the window could close, so they're reaching for asymmetric upside rather than safety.
Hmm.
And speaking of big swings, it looks like the mega IPO calendar is about to get more interesting. Reports this week signaled that SpaceX could flip its S1 as soon as next week, so a June listing is still the target, apparently. The Cerebras success almost certainly accelerates that timeline.
Yeah, I think that's the read. If you're SpaceX and you're watching Cerebras pop 68% on day one, $5 billion IPO, you're not waiting, you're moving forward.
Yeah, and Anthropic raising $30 billion at a $900 billion valuation. That means it surpasses OpenAI as the world's most valuable startup.
Right, not an IPO yet, but a signal. AI private valuations are still rising incredibly fast, which keeps the pressure on every AI IPO to come public at premium multiples.
It also raises the question of whether Anthropic is the next mega IPO after SpaceX. I think even more so after reports a few weeks ago about internal disagreements at OpenAI. But safe to say, if private rounds keep clearing these valuations, going public eventually becomes inevitable.
Yeah, I think there is some questions this year about, SpaceX, Anthropic, OpenAI. Is this going to be the year where all three of those mega IPOs go public? Now it looks like, maybe there's less certainty. SpaceX, at least we know, is going public, or we suspect is going public this summer. And the more that these names get talked about, the more attention flows into the entire IPO market. That's a real second order effect here. Uh, by the way, Avery, I gotta say, I am a bit disappointed in Anthropic. It's a public benefit company. I wish they would benefit the public and go public, even at that $900 billion valuation, instead of staying private so long, longer so that they can go public eventually at, I don't know, a 1 trillion plus valuation. So many individual investors, they want to own these names, but we can't access them. They're staying private.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess beating OpenAI isn't enough right now. They
Yeah.
they need to reach that $1 trillion mark. But in the near term, at least, things should slow down for a bit. Not much going on over the next 2 weeks. Companies are turning in Q1 financials, and we have Memorial Day around the corner. So definitely not a sign of weakness to see this slowdown. It's really just seasonal.
Yeah, and Lincoln International is the one notable deal on the calendar. Investment bank raising $400 million midweek.
Hmm. Interesting deal to slot in here. It's financial services IPO during a quiet stretch. It'll definitely be a test of whether non-AI, non-defense deals can still find demand.
Yeah, or it'll just price quietly and move on. Sometimes a quiet calendar is just a quiet calendar, but Lincoln is active in private markets, so it does have some tailwinds from that business at least.
Yeah, that's a good insight. And on the scoreboard for existing new stocks was another mixed week. IPO index was down 0.8%, S&P barely positive at 0.1%. So IPO index underperforming again.
Yeah, but the winners list reinforces the theme, energy and AI infrastructure. So the winner, Venture Global LNG exporter, up 24% this week.
Yeah, that's interesting because I guess you could argue it's both an energy play and maybe an AI play. Data centers need power. Natural gas is increasingly the bridge fuel for that demand. Just look at the recent filing from INEO, which does natural gas engines.
Right, that's a good point. And then on the losers side, we had Birkenstock down 20% on an earnings miss. Consumer brand slowing growth, same story we've seen all month.
Yeah, the consumer sector keeps getting punished, whether it's Suja or Birkenstock. Seems like anything without a thematic tailwind is really struggling in this market.
Hmm.
So, zooming out, what is this market actually telling us? AI just became the dominant force in the IPO market, not a contributor, the dominant force. And that's a real shift from where we've been.
Yeah, and it's pulling everything into its orbit. Chips, power, infrastructure, real estate. They call it thematic gravity is enormous.
Yeah, and the risk that price to perfection applies to more than just Cerebras. A lot of these deals are pricing on the assumption that AI demand continues uninterrupted at current scale.
And the Iran overhang has not gone away. The whole rally here is happening despite sort of an unresolved geopolitical situation. That's a bit fragile by definition.
But issuers seem to be reading it correctly. Move price or move fast, price big, raise while you can. Memorial Day to Labor Day could be a very active stretch for the IPO market.
Hmm. Especially, I mean, hey, if SpaceX files next week, that becomes the next chapter. And honestly, that might overshadow everything else.
Yeah, so what are we watching as we head into the next week? Uh, Number one, SpaceX. The S1 could land any day at this point, so that's the real headline event.
Right. Hearing potentially Friday, that would tee it up for that launch on the week of June 8th, as we've heard. And then besides that, Cerebras aftermarket trading. Does that day two pullback continue or does it stabilize from here? That tells us how much of the pop was real conviction versus FOMO.
Mhm. And then we have the Lincoln International pricing, the loan deal next week, and an interesting test of non-AI demand.
So big week ahead of us, a bigger one's likely ahead, just not immediately ahead. Unless SpaceX files, then I guess it kind of is a big week. Every week will be a big
hmm
week until it prices then.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it for this week's winners and losers. Get the full newsletter in your inbox by clicking the link in the description. Thanks for listening, and before we go, please listen carefully to our full disclosure. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Renaissance Capital statements should not be considered investment advice or a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any particular security. Certain of the statements contained may be statements of future expectations and other forward-looking statements that are based on Renaissance Capital's current views and assumptions and involve known and unknown risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results, performance, or events to differ materially from those expressed or implied in such statements. Past performance does not guarantee future results. One cannot invest directly in an index.